Well, that next morning in meditation, I said, God, what do we do now? And I had the most direct, vivid response that I've ever heard, such that I wrote it down. And it was, you do not report to the Association of Unity Churches, you report to me. I have sent you to Austin to build a church. Build that church and you will see that it will all work out. Whew. All of a sudden it was clear. But there is a riveting message from this example, and that's of the need for each one of us to place our dependence on God and not on our ego self or on our earthly institutions. Means to be back with you on this holy grounds. My precious Lenore and I always agreed that our 12 years here at UCOH was among the most profound, impactful, and enjoyable of our entire lives. You know, it was just 29 years ago this month that we held our first service at Grisham Middle School lunchroom, just a mile from here. And from that point on, the magic continued to appear. Just a couple months after that, in early 1996, we received a call one morning from Agbandino, the great author of 16 books that sold more than 50 million copies, including The Greatest Salesman in the World. And I was calling to see if we would like him to come out to the church later that year and provide a workshop. And we were thrilled, of course. Now, sadly, Og's heart would not last out that year. But we had known Og for a number of years. Og used to make his way to our church in Michigan often when Lenore was on the staff there. And part of her responsibility was to transport Og to and from the airport. So we got to know each other well and became friends. And one day we were dropping Og off at the airport for a flight. Now at that time, Lenore and I were more than friends, but had not yet talked about a future together. And we were waving goodbye to Og, and he was on his way some distance from us when he turned around and shouted for the entire airport to hear, "If you let her get away, you've got rocks in your head." And I was frozen. I couldn't say a word, and I just stood there. And finally, after a period of time, I turned to Lenore and said something dumb like, "That was nice." Oh, later that year, we were married. This Christmas past, Lenore and I celebrated 40 years of marriage. And thank you. I dug out the DVD of our marriage ceremony and we sat and held hands and watched Reverend Jack Boland perform a beautiful ceremony for us. And of course, I could not have imagined at that time that Lenore would be with me only another 3 months or so. Because even though she had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease 9 years previous, she never let it slow her down. I mean, she was dealing with all kinds of challenges, but she went on and did her life. And her son, Jim, her youngest son, who's here with us today with his partner, Marcy, would take her to boxing for Parkinson's, and we would take her to various exercise programs, and she was still active, moving around with her walker. And it just seemed to me like she'd always be there. And the reason we got married on Christmas Day was because we were both so broke that we couldn't afford a reception, and in Christmas there's a ready-made party. Some of you, including, of course, dear Joan Howes, and incidentally, let's hold Joan in our prayers. I visited her on Friday. She had just come out of the ICU where she was dealing with pneumonia at the hospital. And she's doing much better, and she hopes to come home tomorrow. But let's hold her in the highest. And we know that Joan and some others like Jim and Betty Skaggs know that UCOH began as a rogue church within the Unity movement. And it's an instructive story to know how that came about. You see, when we were in our last year of ministerial school, we received a call from Joan and Fred telling us that they were thinking about starting up a Unity church, and how do you go about doing that? And so we got in touch with the people at Association of Unity Churches, and they called and were sending them information on how to bring this about. We didn't give it a second thought, and then a couple months later, we got a message from the staff there that said, well, they still want to start up that church, and they'd like you two to be the ministers. Well, we, once again, didn't give that much thought to it because we knew that this was going to be God's decision, not ours. And so we waited, as you're supposed to do, until 3 months before graduation and began the process of exploring where we should be. And we went to 6 different places, to Lincoln, Nebraska, Columbus, Ohio, Dallas, Texas, a place in California, other places. And everywhere we went, things shut down. We were not offered anything. Partly because some of them just wanted a single person and not a couple. Others were just not ready to move right then. But every time we came to Austin, everything opened up wide. And we would have people contacting us. As Joan indicated, there'd be a sizable crowd who would come out and greet us. We would have a Jeff Serage come up to us and say, you know, I have a background in sound, and I'd be happy to be your sound person if you come. And Audrey Fulmer said, I have an architectural firm, and we have an empty space upstairs. You could hold your offices up there. And Katha Underwood came to us and said, you know, I'm really good at finding places to hold services. If you can come, I know I'll find you a place where we can start out holding services. So it was clear where we were supposed to be, and in our heart, we just knew this is where we were supposed to come. So we made the decision we would come. And in the last visit here, we went and visited the other 2 Unity churches. One was 20 miles away, the other 12 miles away from this area, telling them our plan to come and start a new Unity church, and we wanted to work with them and get to know them. Well, we got back to Kansas City, and a week before graduation, we were asked to come to the office of the director of the Association of Unity Churches, and he said, I understand you're thinking about going to Austin to start up a church, but I want you to know that the ministers there have objected to it, and I'm supporting the ministers, so you can't be going to Austin, but you know, we need a new church up in North Dakota if you'd like to go up there. And we were stunned. And he said, now, you know, you can always appeal my decision to the executive committee, but no one has ever done that. And I said, yeah, we'll appeal your decision. Well, the executive committee considered it. and said they'd look at it further, but they wanted to have a possible mediation session. So they would send a mediator to Austin, but they set the date for it for the first week in August, and this was the end of May. So for the next couple months, we had graduated, we had to move somewhere. We told the movers, take our stuff to Austin. We bought a home in Austin, and we went into the meeting with people in August knowing that it would get resolved because, we're unity people. We'll smooth things out. We'll work together, right? Well, at that meeting, we were surprised that in addition to Lenore and I, there were 10 other people, the mediator and the 2 ministers of the other churches and their board presidents and their attorneys. And all we heard for 2 hours was, what part of no don't you understand? You're not supposed to be here. Well, we bought a home. We've moved here. Well, you can move somewhere else. Sell the home. That's no problem. So we left, and we were told that a decision would be made, and the decision came back, and yes, the executive committee was going to support what the executive director had decided, and no, we would not be accepted in the unity movement. Well, that next morning in meditation, I said, God, what do we do now? And I had the most direct, vivid response that I've ever heard, such that I wrote it down. And it was, you do not report to the Association of Unity Churches, you report to me. I have sent you to Austin to build a church. Build that church and you will see that it will all work out. All of a sudden it was clear. But there is a riveting message from this example, and that's of the need for each one of us to place our dependence on God and not on our ego self or on our earthly institutions. So the first year we were at the school, and at the end of that year we moved into the building in the strip mall down the street on Anderson Mill and Pecan Creek and Parkway, and things were going great. I'll never forget when we were moving in there was such an energy. So many people were involved, people doing things and absolutely excited about participating. But the thing that stands out in my mind is that Jim Skaggs, who was the director of the business program of the Apollo space mission and worked alongside the famous Wernher von Braun in bringing the space mission into fruition so that our astronauts were able to make it to the moon. Here, Jim Skaggs was standing in the lobby behind an ironing board with an iron pressing out the drapes. And I had no idea that Betty had trained him so well. And all kinds of marvelous things happening. Just the week before, a whole team of people had in their vans and trucks moved pews from the other side of the city where another church had lent us their pews for 5 years during the time of our lease. And the church grew. And it was clear that people wanted to have their own facility and to build their own facility. And Bob and Susan Heinrichs, bless their hearts, took over a program of finding the land. And they spent months researching all the possible places in the Austin area where it might be. And one day, I never forget this morning, I got a call from Bob and he said, Ron, do you have time to go look at a site? And this is the first time we'd had it. This was several months after he had and Susan had started. And I said, well, sure, Bob, let's do it. And so he said, I'll be there at 10 o'clock. Well, he showed up. I got in the car And he drove down the road half a mile and turned in here. And I said, Bob, where are you going? He said, this is it. I said, just half a mile from where we are? I thought we were going to be driving to the other side of the city. He said, yeah. And he got out. And of course, it was all wild land here with high grass, and there had been goats and cattle and all kinds of things here. And I got out of the car, and I remember saying, Bob, this is it. I could feel it. He said, I know. And so the people were invited over, and everyone loved the place. Of course, the problem was there was $750,000 for the land. The land, at the end of that day, we had gotten the keys to the gate, and the fellow who owned it was going to drop off the keys. He lived adjacent to the property right behind here, and he came over with his agent, and they dropped off the keys so we could get in to look around. And I said to him, is that Guthrie O'Donnell or Guthrie McDonald? And his agent said, oh no, it's Guthrie O'Donnell. I have his initials on my Rolodex, G-O-D. And I said, oh my, we're being offered this property by G-O-D. And of course, the problem was the land was going to cost close to $750,000. Jim and Batty Skaggs put up half of that amount. Susan and Bob Heinrichs put up a sizable amount as well. And in addition, Bob and Susan came up with the idea of having an arch out front. And they worked with someone to have it designed, and they paid for that arch to come up. So all of a sudden, things came around. On the first Sunday when we came, actually it was 4 days before the first service, and Lenore came and got me and said, could you come out in the sanctuary with me? Incidentally, there had been people from the church working in all kinds of ways on the grounds. Liz Klein was here busy, and Lou Goodwin Mark was busy, and all kinds of people were busy on the grounds. But also people on the inside were working on building the church along with the construction firm. And it was coming together. It was a community effort. And it was so inspiring. And Lenore asked me to come out, and she turned around right down in the middle of that aisle, and she said, we've forgotten something. I said, what's that, Lenore? She said, we've forgotten that when people leave on a Sunday morning, they have to be able to remember something to carry with them. I said, what? Well, that's a great idea, but what should they carry with them? She said, the message, with God, all things are possible, Matthew 19:26. It needs to be up there on the veranda, underneath where the sound booth was at that time. And I said, that's a great idea, Lenore. We'll get to it. She said, no, it needs to be for this Sunday. I said, well, I'll see what I can do. So I contacted, and somebody directed me to someone who is good at printing. He came out, and while Lenore and I stood there, he said, what size should it be? And he tried various things, 18 inches. Yeah, that'll work, Lenore said. And she approved the font as well. And so that first Sunday and since, this is the first thing I came to check on when I came to visit a couple days ago. Is Lenore's scripture up there? Yes, all right. And then on the week before the carpeting was laid, some of you remember that we invited everyone in the church to come and have their own favorite Bible verse, so that we could have felt pens and everyone could write down their favorite Bible verse on the concrete, because we wanted to be able to know that for all time we are walking on the Word of God. And Lenore, of course, wrote out hers, Matthew 19:26, and mine was Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and God will make straight your path. And this has been so important in our lives, because there is a crossing over point in the life of each person in this lifetime or in another, when he or she moves from trusting their own self, small s self, to not only trusting God, but calling upon God to take over their life. I strongly believe we're seeing evidence of how this is working or not working by two things that are happening in our nation and in the world today. The first thing is enhanced conflict, disagreement, chaos, and polarization. Yes, we've seen this before, but never to this extent during my lifetime. And the second thing is the tendency of people turning to God has dwindled. Not only is church attendance down and financial giving reduced, but also large, increasing numbers of peoples seem not to turn to a spiritual path to guide their life. Do I believe these two factors of life are related? I know that they are. I know with total conviction that a person who turns away from God will sooner or later find herself or himself on a destructive, hurtful, dysfunctional path. My life is a testament to this. I will be 88 my next birthday, and the first 43 years were filled with uncertainty, anxiety, and frustration. Experiences that I chose to deal with by using alcohol and other mind-altering substances that led me in time to Jack Boland and the Church of Today, to the blessings of precious Lenore, and to Gilles and Lillian Desjardins and the Pavilion Treatment Center. Now, I have since learned that you don't have to be in a program of recovery to turn your will and your life over to God, because the life force, the master of the universe, creator, divine mind, whatever name you attach to God, this loving presence and power has a perpetual call out to each and every person without exception. And once we answer that call and make a conscious decision, a commitment to live from that divine place that lives within each person, once we do so, we discover that all of life takes on a new glow, a new awareness, a new being, a new creation, as Jesus taught. And you will find that you relate to life in a whole new way, such that you are interested in life, you are involved in life, you are included in life, and you are inspired by life. Interested in how life can be better for yourself and for others? Fascinated by how spiritual principles work, and amazed at how life gets better and better as you live these principles and allow them to direct how you live your life. You become involved with people you are led to and whom you learn from and grow with. You are actively engaged with people and activities that the universe brings you together with. And you become grateful for the progression you observe over time, leading you on a path that builds connections that are supportive and enriching. You are included more and more as you feel and know that you belong. There is a support group around you that sparks consciousness such that you both receive and provide support that builds community. you find yourself included in such a way that you feel love building over time as your awareness grows of wanting the very best for every person everywhere. And you are inspired to support that which is in alignment with divine order, knowing this enhances the kingdom of God here on earth. You marvel at the profound ways that synchronicity demonstrates in your world. Unexpected demonstrations of good, your greater good unfolding before your very eyes. And you find yourself seeking ways to have communities that you care about thrive by putting these spiritual principles into practice. For example, UCOH, which can demonstrate a renewal of the magic so many of us experienced in its early years. And what this requires is 2 actions. First, your decision to return and invest yourself in truth teachings, in spiritual principles, to embrace that same spark of spiritual passion that led the people of UCOH in its early years. And this is a spark that can build into a flame that can grow into becoming an inferno of faith. And second thing required is for the leadership of UCOH to commit themselves to be open and accepting of new ideas, new ways, new doors to open. There is a temptation for leadership to fall into the trap of communicating a message of, this is the way we've always done it here, or this is the way we do it here, which is stifling, closes the door, drives people away. And instead, leadership can be welcoming, not only of new voices to be heard, but of new opportunities to spread the unity message of love and acceptance and hope. Because whatever our past challenges, a sacred calling awaits each one of us. And when we answer that call and begin to live it, we are lifted to more love, more peace, harmony, and joy than we imagined possible. And we experience a path of mission and purpose that fulfills us beyond belief. As Lenore shared in one of her last meditations, and when my days on earth are over, let me know, dear God, that I had some part in creating a little piece of heaven here on earth. Each of us can share that same mission. And that's the way it really is. God bless each one of you, and God bless Unity Church of the Hills.
Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I circulate, and I am grateful.